Hello there, Jorbs here, coming at you with another Spire side chat. I've been working through some of the Watcher cards, talking about what's interesting about them, what sorts of situations they're good in, what things to watch out for and maybe avoid, how to think about them compared to other characters, perhaps. Today we're going to be talking about Windmill Strike. Windmill Strike is an attack with Retain. Retained cards are not discarded at Retained cards are not discarded at the end of turn. There you go. It deals 7 damage, and whenever you retain it, you increase its damage by 4 for this combat. So, the first time I draw it, this is a card that does 1 more damage than Strike for 1 more energy. Which is not the best, because Strike usually isn't even a good card, honestly. But when I retain it, deals 4 more damage. So 1 turn of retain, we're up to 11, 2 turns, 15, 3 turns, 19, 4 turns, 23. Now, 2 major variables in deciding how good this is are 1, how quickly can we draw it? And 2, how many turns do we get to take before we need this card to actually do something? And I want to point out real quickly in analyzing this card that Volt exists for Watcher. Take an extra turn after this one, end your turn, exhaust. So if you have like 3 or 4 of these cards, sometimes it's hard to do that much on your like extra turn because you had to pay 3 energy to take it. So say I have 4 energy per turn, I only actually get to use 1 energy, and then I have to spend the rest of the 3 energy on Volt. So that hasn't really achieved that much for me, perhaps. But if I have a Windmill Strike in my hand, all of a sudden my Windmill Strike has leveled up once, and all of a sudden it's dealing 15 instead of 11 or whatever. Probably if you're going to try to make this card work, you probably are going to want to upgrade it, which makes the numbers not quite as poor. So all of a sudden it's dealing 20 instead of 15. It's starting to get there. It's starting to be okay. So there are some fights in the game also where you get to take a lot of turns. My experience with Watcher has not been that she has a ton of trouble in the champ fight, but I've definitely had a Watcher deck or 2 which looks like it's going to struggle against the champ, and that's a great example of a fight where Windmill Strike could be quite good. Champ, when he gets below half health, does a like transform sort of thing, cleanses debuffs and changes his attack patterns to be much more threatening. And so a very common strategy against Champ is just to delay the fight, keep him above half health, keep blocking, and scale up. And this is a way to scale up for the Watcher that keeps going sort of indefinitely. Watcher doesn't have that many ways to scale which keep going indefinitely, so not for damage anyway. There's no like demon form for Watcher, for example. So this card can get better if we have lots of Volts or something like that. This card can be a useful card for the champ fight sort of thing, where we don't expect it to be great in other places, but it's good there. This card cannot really be a great card for like hallway fights and elite fights, and it can't really be a great card for Act 4. In Act 4, we have to fight against the elites, who kill us very quickly if we let them survive long. And then we have to fight against the heart, which similarly kills us pretty convincingly if we let it survive for a long time. So it's hard for Windmill Strike, even though it's an internally scaling card. It scales on its own, right? It's hard for it to really compete with the stuff at the end of the game, unfortunately. So this is a card where usually default, I would say, is don't pick it. There are better ways to get an attack which retains. Sands of Time, for example. If you think about Sands of Time after retaining itself twice, it deals 20 damage for 2 energy, compared to Windmill Strike at the same time, it would be dealing 15 damage for 2 energy. So that's just a very simple example of how this card deals 5 more damage than Windmill Strike on a reasonable turn in the fight. Also, we can play Sands of Time earlier if we want for more damage. If we go Divine with Blasphemy or something, then the fact that it costs 4 energy isn't necessarily prohibitive. Also, it's a better card with Snecko Eye. lots of reasons why Sands of Time is better than Windmill Strike, but we're not doing a talk about Sands of Time right now. Maybe that will be later. Yeah, so it's not a card that you're looking for as like one of the premium or even particularly good retain attacks. There are other retain attacks which are also better than this one. It's not a card that you're looking for late game scaling. Like, it's just not going to do enough against the super late game bosses, and with the exception of maybe Awakened One, it's just probably not going to be fast enough there. I guess you could set up like a bunch of like waters against Time Eater and let this scale forever too. But you can probably win with like any attack once you've done that. But where it may be strong, Windmill Strike, is it may be strong in some of those fights which are longer fights where you need to scale, and it doesn't need to be scaling that is particularly good or particularly quick. It just needs to be scaling that exists to get you over some barrier, like the champ fight would be my prime example. So, not a card that I take a ton. Pretty cool card conceptually, I think, but just the numbers on it aren't that great. But certainly can play a role every now and then. Hope you enjoyed the Spireside chat. This one was a bit of a quicker one. And I will see you next time. We'll be talking about some more Watcher cards.